That's a very good question. Does the Bible say in Genesis chapter 6 that angels came down from heaven and had sex with women? No, Genesis 6 does not intimate that, doesn't even suggest that. That is read into the text. Let's take a look at it and let's dissect it. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Pay very close attention. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. The author says the sons of God. He says B'nai Elohim. He does not say Malokim, which means angel or angels, plural. Malakim, Malak, angel. Malakim, angels. So the author is not using this particular term. He is saying B'nai Elohim. B'nai Elohim, sons of Elohim, is a designation that is assigned to men of authority, to rulers, to judges, and to the nation of Israel. The Israelites were the sons of God, the sons of Elohim. In this particular context, since the Israelite nation had not been formed at this juncture, by default it would be kings, people who are in authority. So we'll continue to read. Verse 2. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Verse 3. Then Yah, the Lord, Yah, said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. So we're either looking 120 years before the flood comes upon the earth, or the Most High decreasing the lifespan of man to 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Let's look at how we're reading the passage. The author is saying that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. And what days? In the days that the sons of God decided to take men's daughters, there were giants roaming the earth then. He says here, and also afterward. What's afterward? Well, afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children. So notice what you see in verse 4. In verse 4, you see the sons of God. Let's back up. In verse 2, you see the sons of God marrying women. Then in verse 4, you see those who have married women having children. The author is not saying that the result of this union were gigantes or Nephilim or giants. The author is saying that giants were already on the earth, and even after the sons of God and the daughters of men or men's daughters began to copulate and have children, giants still existed during this period. So this is what we're able to deduce as we are reading the text. So I'll go back to verse 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Not the Nephilim, not the giants, as many scholars will suppose, and many theologians will suppose, but the offspring of the sons of God and women became men of renown. Not the Nephilim, they were already around. So it is a huge misunderstanding to convey the idea that the sons of God were angels who came out of heaven, took on fleshly form with fully functional genitalia for reproductive purposes, to copulate, bring forth giants who corrupted the earth. This is not what Moses is saying it to us as the reader. We have a story to attest to what I'm presenting to you. It's actually in the book of Esther. Let's turn to the book of Esther. We're going to turn to Esther, and I'm thinking that this will shed a little bit of light on what I am arguing here. Let's pick it up at Esther chapter 2, and just a couple of passages here. And I'm going to read verses, let's see. I'm going to read verse 1. We'll start at verse 1 and let's take it to verse 9. Verse 1, after these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the woman, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hedge the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given to them. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. And the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree. So this is very important to recognize. The king has a commandment and he has a decree. And this decree is all beautiful virgins in my kingdom. Ahasuerus, this is a Persian name, his Greek name is Xerxes, is ruling from Persia all the way to southern Sudan. He has a huge kingdom. How many beautiful women will we be able to find in this empire? A lot. So underneath the king's decree, he has the prerogative, the authority, the autonomy, the privilege to send his emissaries to your home to inspect your girls based upon a census. He knows if you have 3, 4, 5 young women. And his emissaries are going to take the most refined of those women, and they're going to bring them back to the king, and the king is going to assign the governor of the women over them, and they're going to spend 12 months purifying themselves, getting ready to present themselves before the king. In antiquity, kings, when they ascended to the throne, they became known as the sons of God. This is a historical fact. So this was their regal or their ascension date when they received a new birth and they received a new identity as God or sons of God. So we understand what Genesis is referring to. What happens is that a lot of theologians and scholars miss the historical component when they are exegeting or interpreting that passage. Let's continue. Verse 8. So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan, the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also into the king's house to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her, and her maids into the best place of the house of women. Dr. Karen Jacobs says, and I'll quote, regardless of how she, being Hadassah or Esther, felt about being taken by King Ahasuerus, she had to cooperate. Esther was at the mercy of a ruthless pagan king, just as her people were. The use of the passive voice is appropriate in this story, for it expresses life from the perspective of being caught up and swept along by circumstances beyond one's control. This is a perfect parallel to what the author is conveying in the book of Genesis. When we read the book of Jude, it seems to suggest that the narrative here in Genesis was centered around angels coming out of heaven. When we read Peter, it seems to suggest the very same thing. But what's their source? Is it Genesis, or is it a pseudepigraphal book called the Book of Enoch, a very popular book in Judaism at that time? So I will argue, and we have an overwhelming amount of evidence to support this position, that Jude as well as Peter, when they are talking about this narrative, Genesis chapter 6 is not their point of reference. The book of Enoch, which is trying to build upon Genesis chapter 6, is its point of reference. Enoch is the one who promoted and propagated. We're talking about the book of Enoch, not the righteous Enoch, but we're talking about a pseudepigraphal text by an unknown writer who is trying to develop Genesis chapter 6 to demonstrate that angels actually came out of heaven to have sex with women. That did not happen in any way, shape, or form. And if we read that passage in its proper historical and cultural context, we'll understand exactly what the author is conveying to us. My name is Arya Ben Nasik. Thank you for writing in to us. This is Q&A with Nasik. We will see you next week. Continue to write to us. We enjoy your questions. May the blessings of the Most High be with you. Shalom.